What's up guys, I'm BTC. We got a patch today along with the event. There's also going to be a bunch of balance changes, including some pretty big nerfs. Got a nice little surprise with the patch today. We got the mini event in addition to all of the balance changes. They did close down the PTR just the other day, so I was fully expecting them to have the regular server updated with those balance changes, but the mini event was a nice little surprise. So that is the Bastion Brick Challenge. I'm not going to go over it too much because I already talked about it in a previous video. If you want to see all the stuff you can get and how it works and stuff, go and check out that other video. So we're going to talk about the hero balance changes. So the first up is a general update to targeted abilities, well, specifically ground targeted abilities like Reaper's Shadow Step, Maze Ice Wall, Symmetra's Teleporter, etc., etc. They will now heavily prefer edges over placing as far away as possible. What this effectively does is it makes the abilities kind of snap a little bit more to the map and to the environment and that sort of stuff. And I was messing around with it on the training map, and it does seem to be a little bit better in some situations, although I do have a feeling that there are going to be cases when you're trying to get it to go to a certain area and it just keeps snapping over to like the side or off to a little ledge, and it's like, no, I don't want it to go there, I want it to go. So it might be good in some situations, it might be bad in others. It's going to take some testing in actual games, but overall it's not really that big of a change. Next up, for the individual balance changes though, we have Bastion. He got what is effectively a very minor nerf. So the self-repair no longer consumes resources when Bastion is at full health, but I mean, this is a nearly inconsequential buff. It's not really going to do anything. The vast majority of the time when Bastion is used, he has a pocket healer, or at least healers nearby. You know, there's almost no situation when Bastion doesn't have a healer, so his self-healing is kind of meh to begin with. And then next up is that he will now correctly initiate a 0.25 second recovery time when canceling his self-repair by attacking. So this means that there's going to be a little bit of a pause when you stop repairing before you can start attacking. So overall, this is a net nerf for the character. Now I realize he's gotten a little bit of use in the Overwatch League lately, but remember, during the Overwatch League when we had the GOATS comp, there was this kind of trial phase when they were using Orisa and Bastion and Symmetra, and that lasted for a short amount of time. They realized that it was easy to counter, and they ended up getting rid of it. So with this new double barrier, they are using Bastion every now and again, and it does have some uses, but again, I'm not sure if this is going to last or if this is just going to be one of those phases like what we had before, because it seems like every time people try to use Bastion, they find out, oh yeah, that's why we stopped using him, because he's just not good and because he's really easy to counter and, you know, all these other issues that the character has. And it's like people forget, like every 6 or 7 months or so, they forget that Bastion is bad and they try him again and they're like, oh yeah, that's right, he's not a good character. Anyways, so moving on, next up is Symmetra. Her primary attack, the beam was lowered from 0.3 meters down to 0.2, and the beam DPS was lowered from 65, 130, 195 down to 60, 120, and 180. So the low end isn't going to have too much of a hit. Middle has a -10, and the top has -15. -15 is huge. Now remember, Soldier 76, when he was back in the meta a while ago, they reduced his overall damage by 1, and it kicked him out of the meta. And now they're dropping this. Now, really the only reason why Symmetra is even being used is because of double barrier. And as soon as double barrier goes away, there's a pretty good chance that Symmetra is going to go away along with it. So the character is only being used because of the other meta that's going on. And again, that's not a really good place for any character to be. And I know people like to complain about the character, but here's the thing. The higher skill players can deal with Symmetra, right? And if you're having trouble, the solution then is to start playing better, to start playing smarter. You shouldn't be waiting for Blizzard to nerf a character just so you don't have to deal with it anymore. Then you're not going to improve as a player that way. So that's just not a good idea to have. Next up is Zarya. Similar situation. They ended up reducing the beam width. It's now 0.15 meters and no longer scales up with energy. And the max beam damage was lowered from 190 to 170. So this is a 20 damage hit on her total, on that max damage. Now, right now, Zarya isn't being used all that much, which is kind of the opposite of the Symmetra situation. Because there are so many barriers, she just can't be that effective. But make no mistake, Zarya is still a very good character, although this damage nerf is going to make it even more difficult for Zarya-related comps to be effective, particularly against Bunker or against Double Barrier. So this is, I don't know, this is kind of a weird thing for the character, and we're gonna have to see where this goes. Moving on to Sigma, he got some buffs and nerfs. First is his primary attack, the Hyperspheres. He got a nerf to the total damage, so the AoE damage was reduced from 35 down to 30, and while this is going to affect, obviously, the other players that don't get directly hit, this also affects whoever you do directly hit with them, because in addition to the direct hit damage, they also take that AoE damage on top of that, so that both of them are combined, and that's how you get the damage for the direct hits. So this is going to be a 5 damage nerf to everybody. Overall, this is probably going to be a pretty decent amount of damage that he's going to lose. Now, a lot of it is just going to be kind of that splash damage that kind of maybe doesn't really affect a whole lot. However, it is going to affect how fast he builds his ultimate, which is going to be slowed down as a result of this. So this is an impactful change, definitely going to lower his damage, not something to shrug off. Next up is the experimental barrier. They added a toggle so that you can just press it and throw it out instead of having to hold it. It's just if you want to play that way. It's not really a buff or a nerf, it's just quality of life. Next up is a definite nerf though, and they changed it so that whenever Sigma gets hacked by Sombra, he will now automatically recall the barrier if it was sent out. So this is unlike how Orisa uses her barrier. I've already talked about this in a previous video. This change is entirely inconsistent with how other abilities work, whether they're temporary or permanent constructs or whatever. Basically, they made it so that when he gets hacked, the barrier disappears, and this is not how any of the other characters work, whether it's, you know, an Ice Wall, a Harmony or Discord Orb, or Orisa's barrier, any of that stuff. So this is effectively unique to Sigma. They made this change. It's not good. This is definitely a nerf to the character. Next up is Accretion. The damage was increased from 50 up to 60, so this kind of compensates for the damage that you lose with the Hypersphere. So you can still get that combo on the enemies if you hit them with the Accretion ability. So it kind of makes your single target damage the same if you're trying to combo them, but it reduces Sigma's AoE damage from just constant normal attacks. Next up is the Gravitic Flux, which is his ultimate. The intro cast time was increased from 0.4 seconds to 0.6. This seems like it's very, very minor, but believe it or not, when you hear him go off and make that, you know, ultimate announcement, that little tiny bit of extra time might give you just enough time to stun him, to sleep him, or whatever it is in order to kind of deactivate that ultimate before he can fully activate it. So that actually is, you know, it's definitely a nerf. It's not massive, but it's definitely a nerf. And then in addition to all that, there was a ton, an absolute ton of different workshop updates where you can create dummy bots and all sorts of things, and they're just making it so that you are now going to be able to do so much more with the workshop, and hopefully we're gonna start getting some really, really good aim trainers with this and things that people can use to practice and improve their gameplay and all that sort of stuff. I mean, really, Blizzard probably should have improved the training map by now, but, you know, if they're not gonna fix it, then I guess the players will just go ahead and do that for them. So those are going to be all of the different balance changes. I know this happened on the PTR just a little while ago, and it was kind of almost forgotten, and people kept bringing it up. They're like, wait, did they reduce the damage yet? Did they reduce the damage? No. So here you are. But anyways, those are all the changes, and if you want to know more about that Bastion mini event, go and check out that other video. Now, for those of you who might be asking, I don't know where the other really big balance patch was, because Blizzard did say that they had some other really big changes in the works, even potentially reworking how Roadhog works as a tank. but we just haven't seen any of that. But now that they shut down the previous PTR, maybe they're going to give us something new. I do think that they need to start focusing a little bit more on making characters viable, not just for the now, but in general, because yes, Symmetra and Bastion might be getting some play now, but as soon as Double Barrier goes away, they're just going to drop to the bottom again, and I don't think that is any good place for any character in the game. So anyways, what do you guys think about all of these changes? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and if you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss anything. Also, come hang out in my Discord server and my Twitch live stream. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to see what kind of cool VIP rewards you can get, check the links down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault.